So if you've been watching the Telesummit this week, you're probably familiar with Sheila. She was the original creator of this Telesummit, and then passed it over to the Center for Sustainable Change, and she's hosted it each time we've done it, and we've been really grateful. She does a great job. You may not know that she's got over 9 years of coaching and working globally as a business and life coach, and has spent the last 5 years organizing events in Spain and online. She's organized events for people like Jack Pransky, Gabriela Maldonado Montano, and Amy Chen Mills, and is the co-founder of the Viva event, which is an annual gathering in Spain that comprises of 3P teachings, fun, laughter, surprises, dancing, and above all, loving connections, which I just love the description of. So welcome, Sheila. And Anne Curtis is joining us. Anne lives in and around France and has worked as a medical doctor, a therapist, NLP and EFT practitioner, and other energy healing approaches. And she retired in 2009 after searching for 30 plus years to find the solution to all suffering, because she felt she had burned out and was disappointed that she hadn't yet found the answer. Anne had a profound spiritual insight in 2014 while helping her mom survive incurable cancer. She is an author of the 3 Principles Amazing Growing Resources, and has put a 3 Principles resource library together, which is available on the Real Change portal now, which is fantastic. So those are the official bios, but I'd really like to hear a little bit more from each of you about your story, how you came into the principles, and how you ended up here with us today. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Sheila? You're muted.
Great start, right? I was aware of background noise, so I thought I'd mute myself. Well, this is so different for me. Thank you, Terry, for the wonderful introduction, and great to be here with Anne too. So yeah, I really did have my arm twisted by Lynn Ann. So I wanted to shout out to Lynn Ann. Thank you for twisting my arm, and thank you for all the help that she's, that we've been behind the scenes creating and collaborating and putting the Telesummit together. So yeah, really, it was when we were throwing around some ideas for the Telesummit, and one of the topics that came up was there's no right way or wrong way of sharing these 3 principles, and there are people out there that carry on in their jobs. They don't drop everything and become coaches and facilitators and practitioners. And that's where this title came up from, for behind the scenes. Let's talk to people who are doing the work behind the scenes, because as that saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community effort to make things happen. So yeah, just to share a bit about my story, I don't know where to start really, but I've been in Spain for 32 years. And I came over here I wanted to travel the world. And this is as far as I got, basically. So I met my ex-husband and settled down, had children and all that sort of thing. And when I was thinking about the common thread of my story, it really has been about being in a support role, really, about helping and being of service. When I look back, even, as I created a business out here importing food from the UK, that kind of fell into my lap. I wasn't looking for that. And that was really successful for 12 years until it wasn't. But when sort of 10 years into that, I remember I got into yoga due to having a bad back. And that's the point when I see that I started having what I would call a kind of more spiritual seeking in life. It was like, okay, now this is my way to go forward. And that's when, the reason I'm saying this is when I bumped into coaching. And that's where my journey with coaching started, because I had some business coaching myself for the business. And again, on the spiritual part, I knew I wanted to be doing something more than importing sliced bread, baked beans, bacon and sausage from the UK into Spain. It just didn't feel like I was fulfilled. So that took me on the coaching path and exploring how the self-help path, I suppose, to call it that. you know, self-improvement. How can I be happier? How can I, so it started with me. How can I have a better quality of life? How can I stop being fearful? How can I get rid of these insecurities? It was all about me to begin with. And then it was, okay, now I see more of this. I've learnt my tools and techniques. Let me go out and start helping other people. So I did a variety of things, as many people do. You know, I studied NLP, some EFT, Reiki, lots of different techniques and tools. And Louise Hay was one of the big things. I became a Louise Hay teacher. But I could see there were results, but there weren't constant results. There weren't results for everybody. And I still felt there was something missing. And this is when the 3 principles entered my life. And then that's when the searching and seeking stopped. So that was back in 2010. When I through Jamie Smart, I was introduced to principles. He kind of did the marketing stuff, and I had no idea that's what I was going to learn. He put out an email, because I did the NLP, so I was on his email list because he was the big NLP teacher in the UK. So he, you know, dropped this email into my inbox that said, if the secret's so great, show me the money. And at that point in time is when my business was not doing so well, going downhill for lots of different reasons. And one of them was recession. And so I thought, great, you know, I've done all this law of attraction stuff, still not seeing any money. Let me see what he's got to teach me. So I buy the DVD set, I sit down and watch this on the screen. And of course, something impacted me. I started really hearing about security does not come from the outside. Security comes from within. It's inbuilt. It's not something that we can make happen. That was like all these things I've been learning, all these techniques and tools. Somewhere along the way, whether I'd missed it, I don't know, but I'd never heard that it only works one way, that it's an inside-out job. So, and that was, for me, the crux of that was it's 100%, it's always inside out. Because I had heard something with the Louise Hay work, I'd heard the inside, you know, stress is an inside job. But then I knew you had to go on and to do the affirmations to make that happen. So what I was hearing in this, there's nothing to do, nothing to do, nothing to do. It's already there, it's already there. And it's like, I was still puzzled by it. So off I go to the UK. I said to Mark, my partner, then, you know, next time he puts one of these events on, I'm off to the UK. So I did, and I kept going back. I went back 3 times, went to the UK 3 times to hear more about this. And what was curious to me was I'm not a person, this is how I thought about myself, I'm not a person that likes repetition. And every time I went, he was saying the same thing. Change the title, but the same content. Change the title, same content. And I'm like, okay. And I was hearing something, and then I'd already started my coaching business by this time. And because it was having a really positive effect for me, I wanted to start sharing it with my clients. And I had no real understanding of how to do that. It's like, I knew something was different, and I could say the words, like, okay, you know, thought creates feeling is what I was hearing at that point in time. Thought creates feeling, that's important. But I didn't think that was enough. So what I did was, and this is part of how the Tele Summit came about as well, is I had an idea on a plane ride home after I'd been to another meeting that Rudy and Jenny Kennard. So Mark and I had been over and sat there, and on the plane ride home, I suddenly had this idea, do you know what I could do? I could interview some of the teachers that I've been meeting. And that way I can point my clients to that and say, listen to this, you know. So that's what I started doing. I was very, very kind of cowardly in the first, well, it wasn't coward, it just made sense to me to reach out to people that I already knew, which was, I'd met Rudy and Jenny. I'd also met Sue Pankiewicz and her husband there, Peter Anderson, because they're all part of the same family. So I went to sort of my hot, like close in the circle, if you like, first. And it worked really well. So I put them, it wasn't just my clients, so I kind of put it out to the public and said, if you shared it with my list, shared on Facebook and stuff, you know, if you want to come along and listen to these interviews. I did one every month. This was back in, I think it was 2011 I started doing that. And in that time, there were resources were so low on the ground. It was, you know, to get a book or to get a recording or it was so difficult. So of course these were quite popular at the time because there was hardly anything else out there. So I thought, okay, I'll keep doing this. So I met people like Jack Pransky, Garrett Kramer. Obviously I interviewed Jamie Smart because he was my first first introduction to this. So I started to get to know people in the field, if you like, through reaching out and saying, would you? And people, as we know, in this Three Principles community are very kind and very, very willing with their time. So as I said, we got to meet quite a few people like that. Started building my list as well, which was very nice. And then along the way, the idea came along for the Telesummit. I don't know if you want me to speak a bit more about that now, or if you want me to wait till later. It's entirely up to you. Mary, you tell me.
I think, yeah, go a little bit into how that started so that people get it.
That was part of the reason for me sharing this, is that how did the Telesummit come about too? So I had this idea about creating a Telesummit, and of course I wanted Three Principles teachers to be on the Telesummit. And that's about as much as the idea was that, the initial idea was, right, I want to create a Telesummit and I'd love to have Three Principles teachers on there. No particular idea about topic, even though, my niche, if you like, was helping people grow their businesses. I didn't necessarily, for some reason, have to be about that. And then the next idea that came forward was, so if you're going to create this thing, how can you, number one, how can you spread the word far and wide? And number two, how can we serve the community in the best way possible? And along my journey, the only not-for-profit, the only charity that I'd come across was Centre for Sustainable Change. And so what made sense to me was to reach out to the centre and ask if they wanted to. So the idea was, okay, I'll do the Telesummit. The model then, and still is really, the common model of Telesummits was that you would do them live and then you would sell the recordings. So I thought, okay, I could sell the recordings and then share some of the profits. That would make sense, because that would be helping spread the word even more if money went into a charity that was doing the work. So the person that I knew was Amy. I didn't know her actually at all. I knew her name, Amy Chen Mills. And it was the time when she was just transitioning, I believe. She was transitioning away from the centre, more or less. She was handing over to Dave. So I sent an email off and said, look, just briefly, this is an idea that I've got. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. And she was like, yeah, okay, sure. So we set up a Skype chat. So I'm explaining my idea. So, I would like to do this, as I've explained to you. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but this is the idea, and then I'll charge afterwards. And what I would like to do is offer the centre 50% of the profit. And she's looking at me, and she looked very puzzled. And she said, "Tell me again, Sheila. What do you mean? You mean you're going to organise it? You're going to pay for it? You're going to do all the work? You don't want us to do anything, but you want to give us some money?" And I said, "Yeah. I just want to be. I want to be okay with putting your name on the bottom and saying, 50% of profits will go to Centre for Sustainable Change." And she said, "Well, it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?" I said, "Well, I think so, but I'm not going to do that without permission." And from there, she was like, "Well, yeah, okay, of course." And she was still like sort of assimilating. And then from there, we started having a conversation about what it could look like. And I had, as I said, I didn't have any fixed ideas about topics, what it could be. And that conversation turned into, well, we could do this and that. What about calling it Transforming the Community from the Inside Out? What about if we invite so-and-so? What about if we do this? We could have 2 speakers on instead of having one. So it flowed, it just really, and so now I'm sitting back and thinking, great, she's got all these ideas. It was taking form before my eyes now. And, and she was a journalist, so she wrote some of the copy for the, because I wanted to make sure we were in alignment, with what the centre wanted to put out. That was my main concern, if you like. I didn't want to paint a picture that wasn't in line with the centre. So that's how it was born, really. And I literally did do everything. But we talked and collaborated, and she reached out. I mean, that was another thing. She knew lots of people that she'd worked with via the community, so she reached out to people and had them come in and speak. So I was doing sort of the backstage stuff, the behind the scenes stuff, doing the admin stuff to get it all together, creating the website, organising that, all the moving parts that happen to create, to make this thing happen. There's quite a lot of work in the background. So I did that, and it went really well. And then it was like, shall we do it next year? Yeah, let's do it next. So I said, I would like to do it next year. And the rest is history, as they say. So here we are on Tele Summit 5. And I know, as I said before, came to 2016, I had some health issues, and I kind of had to have a reevaluation of where I was putting my time and energy. And the Tele Summit was one of those things, was like, it was an awful lot of work. And in terms of my livelihood and money coming in, it wasn't really paying me anything. And so it was like, what do I do with this thing? It was the obvious thing, was just to contact Dave at the centre and Lynn Ann and say, look, I'm not going to be able to do this energy-wise anymore. Here you go, would you like it? And they were like, yeah, of course, let's take it over and let's run it ourselves. And then very graciously invited me back to host. That was last year, and then again this year. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, and everybody who's had a chance to listen this week, is very grateful that you did all that. For sure. They've just been amazing. So, Anne, tell me how you got into the principles and how you kind of came around. It sounded like it was a long time before the principles kind of snuck in, and I'm wondering, kind of what you saw as a change first and how you became involved.
Yeah, excuse me, if I can get my voice back now. Okay, so yeah, I had a bit like Sheila, I had done lots of other things before. I had started off. Well, I started off being a medical doctor, but even then, when the first term when I went to medical school, I hated it, and I went home at the end of the first term and told my parents I was giving up and I was going to India to be a yogi, and which if I'd known how to do that, I probably would have done, but at the time I didn't. So I carried on and went back to medical school and finished. And then when I finished medical school, I was really disappointed in how unholistic it was, the approach that I'd been taught, and how I couldn't actually cure anybody. So then I went into, I stuck around in medicine, but eventually I did more training in psychology and then in psychotherapy. And then when, again, like with Sheila, I wasn't getting the results. Some people were getting good results, but I wasn't in my life. And a lot of people still weren't getting the results that I was hoping for with them. So I did NLP training and EFT and lots of the other things, hypnotherapy and so on. And again, got better results, but still wasn't getting the results that I was hoping for. So eventually, and I was still part-time doing general practice and part-time doing the therapies and combining them, and then doing energy healing as well. And eventually I just really got burned out, really didn't feel that I could charge people for what I was doing, because I didn't really know whether people would benefit from it or not. And also, I hate working indoors. I hate working in offices. I like being outdoors. So why I'd ever been a doctor, I don't know. But anyway, so in the end, I just thought, right, that's it. I've had enough. I'm giving it all up. And that was 2009. And it was 2014, I think it was. My mother developed cancer. So I'm in Jersey now, which is where my parents were living. And I was in France at the time. And then my mother got, she was very fit and well, but then she got diagnosed with this very peculiar form of cancer. And at first, I just let them get on with whatever they were doing medically. But then they told her that there was nothing they could do. So I had gone back to live with them and to help them find alternative cures. And she was doing really well. She had, although they told her that the tumor would just get worse and worse and worse and would kill her, basically. And with this alternative cure that we came up with, the tumors all went away almost completely. And then about 6 months later, out of the blue, they started coming back again. And it was, so I had this experience where I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Because I should be thinking positive. And if I'm not thinking positive, I'll be having, a detrimental effect on her, all the, positive thinking stuff. And so immediately I thought, okay, so I took myself off to the North Coast in Jersey in my little camper van and sat there quietly looking at the lovely view and just asked for guidance. And that's when I had this really weird spiritual experience where I had this download into my brain telling me to just repeat these three phrases that came into my head, and which I did. And when I did that, immediately I knew that it was not my responsibility, and that I could just be there for them, and I was just completely calm and not trying to find another cure and allowing them to go through whatever they were going through, and which was like unheard of for me, because previous to that I had been feeling responsible for them my whole life. So about 6 months after that, my mother had got worse and worse and worse, and about 2 weeks before she died was my birthday. My sister gave me as a present for my birthday, Somebody Should Have Told Us, Jack Pransky's book, Somebody Should Have Told Us. And that was the first I ever heard about the three principles. I had never heard of them before that. And I read it, and when I first read it, I couldn't quite see how it was different from all the other things that I'd read before, but it felt different. And so I read it again, and then it suddenly dawned on me that up until that point, well, rather up until the point when I'd had those three phrases, I had always thought that my feelings were important, and that they meant something important, that they meant something was wrong. And, if there were uncomfortable feelings, they meant something was wrong and I needed to do something about it. And reading this book, I suddenly realized, oh no, they don't mean that at all. I got that completely wrong, and no wonder I'm in such, I've been in such a mess, and things now it makes sense, right? And then of course, more and more I got into the spiritual understanding of it after that. Well, for the first 6 or 12, well, first 6 months at least, I was reading everything I could find and watching all the videos and trying to work it out, like you do, like most people do when they first hear about it, trying to work out, well, what is mind and what is thought and what is, and trying to think, so, which is crazy when I think about it now. It's like thinking about not thinking, but anyway. So because I was finding one thing after another that was so great, and every time someone would ask a question about it, I would think, oh, I know, I've seen that, so-and-so. It was easier. I thought, well, it's going to be easier for me to put all these things together in one place, so I can just say, just go there, because it's all there, all the resources that I'd found, rather than trying to find it every time someone asked a question. I was going, I was spending hours looking for whatever it was that I'd found before. So that's what got me started in putting together the, initially I did it as the book, I thought it was going to be a whole book, but of course you're just adding more and more and more stuff to it. And so I started the Three Principles Resources Facebook group and the Facebook page. But again, it was a lot of work putting the stuff on there and keeping it up to date. And then luckily, again, out of the blue, never knowing what's going to happen, Elizabeth Lovius got in touch with me. I didn't know her before, but she got in touch with me and said, oh, I'm putting together this new website, Real Change Portal. That's at realchange.info, yeah, the Real Change Portal. And I'd really like to have a resources library in the back of it, so that people can find all the resources that they want, and it can be searchable and so on. Would you be interested in putting it together? And I think for me that's really funny, because a library to me is like, me do a library? But actually it's what I was doing anyway, and I was really enjoying doing it. So I was like, oh yeah, that would be great. And when she found Zotero, which is the library it's based on, and it's great. I just love it, because it just it does a lot of the filing for you. I mean, there is a lot of work behind that in making sure it's labeled in the right ways and it's in the right files and so on and so on. But yeah, it's like when people say it just isn't work, I just enjoy doing it, and I add a bit here and I add a bit there, and I enjoy doing it. So and it's something I can still do. I don't have to be in an office doing it. It sounds like an office job, but actually my office is my camper van. I have portable internet, and I sit looking at the sea, and and have the door open and listen to the sea as well when I can. So yeah, so I didn't mean, I didn't go out I didn't go out thinking, oh, what am I going to do and how will I do it? It just sort of happened. And now the idea now is to make it so that more and more people, the real change is coming together now. So the idea now will be to let more people know about it, and to do more videos, and to get more people who don't know about the 3 principles to find it through that too. Not just, I mean, obviously the resources are there for people who already know about the principles, but it's also to bring people in from outside too. And yeah, so I also did a course with Jamie when I first learned about it, just to really get into the community and talk to a few more people, and do some coaching with people, and yeah. So the Facebook groups, I hated Facebook before that. But actually the Facebook groups for this have been really useful, and the pages and so on, but the groups in particular. So yeah.
So I'm curious about that, because you certainly didn't go out to help all these people originally. It was just something to make your life easier. And yet a lot of people who hear about the principles do have a desire to share, and sometimes we go overboard in our sharing. And so how did that, what skills did you bring from, doctoring and all of that, to suddenly have to find a way to categorize and do all of that? Was that a whole new range of skills that you had to learn?
Not really. I mean, I'd also, when I left, when I finished my, when I gave up my practices, I decided that I would have to make money somehow, and the only way I could think of doing it was to set up an internet business. So I had studied internet marketing a lot. I'd done a lot of internet marketing studying and trying to build a business, and actually lost most of my money doing it, or more than most of my money doing it. But I had learned a lot about how to do things online, and how to do websites and Facebook pages and groups and things like that. So it wasn't difficult from that point of view. And the library it's so easy to put together, because Zotero is already set up as a library. It really, doing that is not difficult. I still need some help. If anybody's interested, I still need some help anyway, with a couple of things actually. One is with making sure everything is categorized properly. So for example, I've put there's hundreds and hundreds of videos, but unlike the books, the books are all categorized, and they're hopefully in the right files, and they're under the right things and so on. But the videos are just in one big file and are not, partly because it's easier with the books, because you know what they're called, and you know what they're about. You
pull the words out of them.
Exactly. Whereas the videos, you have to watch every single one, because people this is for people who are putting their videos on YouTube. It would be really helpful if under the videos, or wherever you're putting them, you actually put what it's about, not just because a lot of the titles are very obscure, or don't really tell you what it's about, or they just say it's about 3 principles. So really helpful titles would be helpful, and content, what the content's about, and putting the keywords would also be helpful. And what I could do with now is some help in actually watching the videos that are already on there, finding out what they are about, and putting them in the right categories, because there are a lot of them that need filing like that.
And we'll be sharing your email address at the end. So if people want to get in touch with you to offer that assistance, it certainly has been a benefit to everybody.
Sure. And also on the other thing about Real Change is that it's based on stories, people's individual stories, just like we've been describing, about how understanding the principles has changed our lives, and also about and also on statistics. So there's a section on statistics as well, but the stories part is done by videos. We video interview people, but what we need is somebody to edit the videos. So if anybody's good at edit, or you know anybody that's good at editing videos, that would be great too. So if you're looking for something behind the scenes to help with there's a couple of things going, right? So no, I didn't. Just the things just turned up. You know, I think with most of these things, and like when I've been thinking about, well, what will I do next? I've been writing some books. And those come, you know, I get on a bit more with one, and then something will come up and I think, oh yes, that's a bit to go in that one, and I do that. I've got one of my books, I did a word count on, and it's got about 50,000 words in it at the moment, and I'm like, no, I only want about 10. So it's cutting it down, you know, and I have different ideas for it that come along. But my latest one is to set up a project to have to help 10 million people, not 10 million, 1 million people become millionaires in a year. I thought, oh, that sounds exciting. A lot, you know, and to learn about, if they don't know about the 3 principles at the same time. So I thought there are so many people I noticed in internet marketing, for example, who are desperate to make money and not getting anywhere. And I thought you know, people are interested in making money. And if they can find out where that really comes from, you know, what's behind that, and learn the principles at the same time, that would be quite a good way of getting people in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you were behind the scenes once you got into the principles part. Sheila, you were kind of in front doing the coaching and stuff on a regular basis, and then switched to kind of behind the scenes. So what skills kind of did you transfer over, and where did you have to kind of step into the unknown?
Oh, well, see, it's interesting because I don't think of coaching as being front. I think of coaching as being behind the scenes as well. That's funny. Because I was reflecting on that. I mean, I think, yeah, so I think main stage is like being public speaking, or being the person, you know, writing the book, or yeah, your name's out there or something, I don't know. But yeah, I think coaching is behind the scenes because I feel like I'm in a supportive role. I feel like I'm supporting other people to do whatever. You know, I love to help people who love to help people. So I work with a lot of coaches in growing their businesses because they love what they do. So I'm supporting them to do what they love. So kind of still feels like backstage to me. But interesting, yes, I trained as my training is as a secretary. All the way back when I left school. I mean, my whole ambition was to be from, I think, age 8 or something like that. I remember because I had my best Christmas ever, and it must have been when I still believed in Father Christmas because I was so excited. I asked for a typewriter. It was like the best Christmas present I've ever had. It was this, I can remember how it felt still, you know, just waking up in the morning, it's there. Oh my God, Father Christmas bought me the typewriter, you know. So from that age, and, you know, much to my parents' disappointment, because I went to a grammar school and got my A, but that probably doesn't mean much to people in America, but it's back in those days, you were streamed into different schools, you know, you passed a certain exam and you went one way or you went another way. And then I passed all the, you know, the exams I needed to got lots of O-levels, prime candidate for university. But what did Sheila want to do? She wants to be a secretary. Are you sure? You're going to regret this for the rest of your life? Well, hey, you know, no, I have never, ever regretted it. Ever, ever. You know, they were so sure that I would regret it, but I haven't. And it, you know, I came with skills. So I was, you know, good at typing and shorthand and all that sort of thing. So admin stuff, which has served me well all these years, because when I went into business, the import business of food, I was the admin person. You know, I've always enjoyed that type of work, which a lot of people that I meet are very creative, and, you know, especially in the coaching world, food principles world. Well, I've never thought of myself as being, I hadn't until I came across the principles, and somebody pointed out, well, actually you're creating life minute to minute, moment to moment. You are a creative soul, you know. And I was like, really? Okay. I always considered myself to be not creative. So I put myself in that admin department, and it served me well, as I say, you know. So I do enjoy doing accounts. I enjoy doing the admin side of work. I enjoy helping people with the admin that hate doing it. I'm quite happy doing that. So I didn't really have to learn any new skills, basic skills. Obviously, you've got to keep up with tech stuff. And I actually tell everybody I hate tech, but but I don't suppose I hate it that much, because I kind of still do quite a lot of it. And it takes a lot to, I'm the organizer in terms of organising events out here, which was something that fell into my lap again. I wasn't looking to organise events at all. And it was, as I said, that's where I met Jack Pransky on the interviews. And then he said he would like to come to Spain. And I'd heard that from so many teachers. I was like one of those throwaway remarks. I would just go, yeah. But he was persistent with it. And then my friend Katja got on board with translating his book into German. And so we teamed up, the three of us, and because she was living in Spain then. And she said, do you know Jack Pransky wants to come to Spain? I said, yeah, everybody wants to come to Spain and do an event. Everybody wants to do a teaching in Spain because they want to travel, right? And she said, no, he really wants to come. It's like, does he? Okay. And then we set up a Skype conversation. And, before we knew it, we'd created this program, and we started running. That was back in 2012. So I had a coaching business, no intention of doing events in Spain, creating any sorts of events. But he wanted to come, and that's kind of history now, because he comes back every year without fail so far, twice a year, generally speaking. And we have great events out here, so it's kind of become the second arm of my business, quite a big part of my business now, which is wonderful. I love it.
It's interesting that both of you, and it was the same for me as well, feel kind of like you fell into it, or things just happened and kind of went in that direction. Now, that might happen for a lot of people, but they wouldn't necessarily follow that. They would put up walls and say, oh, that's too scary, or I don't know how to do that. So I'm curious as to why, when the idea struck you, there wasn't a building of walls and a no, I can't do that, and how the feeling was different because you were coming from a three principles standpoint. If either of you could speak to that.
I wasn't even really thinking about it. I think that's it. It's no thought. I wasn't thinking about it at all. I think that's the point, isn't it, really? It just came and I just did it. And I think that's what it is not thinking about it, is just doing it. And
it certainly removes a lot of limitations if you don't have all that thinking about it.
And it's interesting because when I was first doing the library, it was obviously a lot of work. I could see that there was going to be a lot of work getting it all together when it was starting out. And so I asked for volunteers, and at that time, Pete Bailey was around, and he was he was being very quiet. He was being very quiet and very, not like he is now, talking to everybody. He was very quiet and very anxious, and I said, well, Pete, you like doing background stuff. Would you like to help me with the library? And he said, oh yeah, that'd be great. And he came in and he did that, and he was doing, so he was adding stuff into the library, and that was fine. And then it came to the conference in May in London that was coming up. And Elizabeth wanted me to go because we were going to launch the website, the realchange.info website. So she wanted me to go. So I said at one stage, I said to Pete, are you going to come? He lives in Birmingham. Are you going to come down to London for the conference? Oh, I'd love to go, but maybe one year I'll be able to go. And I said, yeah, what would stop you going this year, Pete? And he said, okay. And then we found out that there were some sponsored places that you didn't have to pay for the ticket necessarily, if you hadn't got the money to pay for it. So he worked out that he could come down for the day and go to the one day when we were launching it. And within no time at all, he was coming to the conference, and now he's talking to everybody. And so it's really interesting that you can get in and do the background stuff, and then other things turn up, and then other things. And Pete is really good at taking the opportunity when it comes, at following the whatever does come up, and without the thinking about it now. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I think it's mainly not thought. You just do what you feel like doing and enjoy doing.
it's funny. I worked behind the scenes on Michael's Super Coach Academy, and I kept saying, "Oh, I'm not a coach. I'm not a coach." But so many times I'd get into conversations, and it would be coaching conversations. But I still had that. Well, I'm not a coach, so it's okay. I'm just winging it kind of thing. So it's funny that when you start behind the scenes, it can't help but affect you, and you get exposed to more people, and you take in things. And sometimes the people that you least expect to teach you things or to help you see things show up in your life. So Sheila, how does that ring true for you?
Yeah, very true. It's I think I'd be lying if I said it's all really easy and I don't ever think, I don't shut myself down, because I can clearly see that I have ideas, and before I know it, I've come up with all these reasons why that won't work. It's so, I've only noticed it in the past maybe year. So there are ideas that I have that, oops, we've lost Anne. She's disappeared. She'll be back. There are ideas that I have, and then I recognise, oh, you're shutting it down. So I write them down and leave it for a while and see what happens. But obviously the ones that have come to fruition, I didn't do that for some reason. I think a lot of it's to do with inspiration. I mean, so for example, with Jack wanting to come, it was like, Jack Pransky, the author of Somebody Should Have Told Us and many other books, it just seems so perfect to me that, okay, number one, he wants to come here. Number two, I can take the training. I don't have to travel anywhere. Number three, I can make use of my organize the skills and the stuff that I enjoy doing in the background. The piece that was interesting was like, oh, now I've got to learn how to promote and get people, because that's always the hardest thing with events. Sure. Is getting bombs on seats, as they say, Yeah. So there's been a big learning curve with that, but I've really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Don't know if that's answering your question totally, but I suppose when I look back on it, it was the excitement factor of it that had me, and the same with the Tele Summit, and and the same with other events that I've organised here. It's kind of been the excitement, the inspiration factor that's kept me going and wanting me to kind of keeping me moving, because I think we all have doubts and nervousness about things, even putting on the Tele Summit. When this begins, I'm always nervous at the beginning of it about hosting. What could go, what could go wrong? Like Anne dropped off, what if I drop off? What if my internet goes wrong? What if there's all those things? And now I've learned to not take any notice of that stuff. It's like, just, okay, interesting thoughts. Yes, what if it does happen? I mean, yesterday I made a classic boob, an error on one of the sessions, and immediately the adrenaline kicks in and my heart starts pounding. But within seconds, it was like, okay, it happened, move on. Whereas before understanding where my experience was coming from and understanding I don't have to take everything seriously, that every thought I have, and I have to take it seriously, I would have been very, very, those palpitations, that nervousness, that would have carried on probably through the whole session, and I would have been like just dying to get off. Whereas I kind of set myself on the direction, particularly this time. I think, as most people, I think I see more as I'm having more insights and getting to see my own tendencies, the stuff that I buy into that seems really real. And so I'm noticing that more and more, and being able to dismiss it a bit more, I think. And for this particular Tele Summit, I set the intention to enjoy myself. Like, it wasn't all about, you must get it right, and you must do it perfect, and you mustn't do this, and you mustn't, and what if. It was more like, so I did my preparation, as I do. And then it was like, okay, now it's done, drop it, forget it, enjoy yourself, have a good time, connect with people, see what happens, see what turns up. And, I can honestly say this has been probably the one that I've enjoyed, because I've set the attention on some, I've really enjoyed it. They've all been great, but this one I felt more relaxed around. I've sat back and just really, loved the feeling on some of the calls. love the connection with the people. I think, and maybe it's because I have as well been reflecting on my rest of my life. You know, we don't know how much time we've got left, right? And it's been sort of a lot of that's my life at the moment is what do I want to do with this one and only precious life? The time that I've got left, I'm going to spend enjoying it, not doing stuff that I don't enjoy. What's the point of that? You know, so it's all about enjoyment, following that feeling of pleasure, taking me in that direction. Let me see where this takes me, and that seems to and not take any notice of the erroneous thinking around it. You know, that's not telling me anything, but it's not really telling me anything true.
Yeah, and we think that perfectionist thinking of making sure everything is perfect is somehow going to ensure a smooth event. And so many times, even when you do everything right, something unexpected happens and you have to deal with it. And yet, regardless of how ridiculous it is that happens, it all seems to work out okay in the end. And I have to say, 3 Principles people in general are very forgiving of things. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really helpful, isn't it? When you know you're in a community of people that are very forgiving. And actually what I've noticed as well is that making mistakes, if you like yesterday, you know, the boobs or whatever, they end up being a great talking point, and people learn. I learned from it. Okay, you've learned something from it. I won't do that again. And it actually, you know, this thing that we know about our own inner resilience, it's that as well. I know I can rely on that. So it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter how many mistakes I make. It doesn't matter whether people think, oh my goodness, why have they chosen her to do this? Or, you know, that's their separate reality. That's their thinking. I know that the core of who I am, the essence of who I am, that's never going to be damaged. That's never going to be hurt. That's my, I suppose that's kind of my insurance on some level, but I know who I am, right? I know who I am. It's not the thoughts that I'm having. And so I'm really, I suppose that's really important for me right now. It really is. It really is.
So I'm curious if either of you would share some of those times when there was a mess up and how it did turn out okay. Because people who've never done events like that worry about those things being the end all be all and being this tragic thing that nobody can ever get over. And I can recall several events where, you know, you do so much planning and then something out of the blue happens and you're like, what do I do with this? And it's totally totally different experience when you're worried about it and then you're thinking about what it means about you as a planner or you as a person of how the event comes off versus when you're in a service mode of this happened, what's the best way that we can all enjoy what we've got left? And it's a very different experience in fixing things that way. So I'm curious if you've had any bloopers that, you know, would have thrown you in the old days and just it didn't throw you so much after understanding the principles.
I'm just trying to think that apart from just now, when I had suddenly discovered that my mains lead had fallen out and I'd run out of power and I just got cut off. I was like, but even then, you know, it's like I come back on but I think, as you said, it's good in a way that other people see, oh, they're not perfect, and that does happen, and so it's okay for me to take a risk because, you know, it doesn't matter if something goes wrong. But funny, I'm sure there have been lots of times when I've done things like you said, and I can't even remember them now. Whereas in the past I would have been remembering it all and thinking, oh my goodness, that was terrible, and going over and over it. Now I don't even do that, so I can't even remember.
Telling all your friends the disastrous week you had, and
yeah, no, that doesn't happen now. No.
I agree with you, Anne. I'm struggling to actually come up with, you know, it's very fresh for me because that happened yesterday. You know, I had the wrong notes. I was, you know, about to interview Jamie and Brock, two guys, and I'm looking at my notes and it said, and I'm you know, something about introducing the 3 ladies, which were obviously my notes from the day before, and we had the 3 ladies on. So I was about to open my mouth and say, and then I said it out loud. You see, I just thought, it's the easiest thing to do now is to share that I've made a mistake instead of trying to, you know, ruffle around and try and make it right. And it took me a few seconds to remember. In preparation, I print it off hard copy. So I have my notes on the computer, but I completely forgot for a few seconds that I had hard copy. So I started in panic mode. In panic mode, I started clicking and trying to look for the website to read out their bios, because I obviously didn't have their bios ready, to the bits that I wanted to share with people. And then within a couple of seconds, when I felt myself just relax and go, okay, it doesn't matter. And they were really, really lovely guys, as you say, really lovely people. They were laughing. So I was laughing. And that settled me down a bit. And it was like, oh, I've got a hard copy. Right, let me pick that up. And so I had it right there. But, you know, they would have been fine if I didn't read their bio. That's the thing. There's always a fallback position. It's a bit like, I don't know if it's okay to share this, but I'm going to share it anyway. You know, Charlotte on the very first session forgot to hit record for the first 10 minutes, as you know, Terry. And so we had a little conversation. What should we do about that? Well, I think people will be fine that they can read your bios on the, you know, underneath it says your bios are available here. People aren't going to get the first 10 minutes of where you were sharing your story. That's fine. I think people are very forgiving. And that's something that that I take on board now much more than I used to, because I used to be, I think people, I'll speak for me. I have a tendency to think that people think like me. I forget that people don't think like me. So I can be very judgmental at times. I used to be a lot more than I am now. And I've got this perfectionist tendency. So if there were, you know, there used to be, I was like, oh my God, people think about me. I've made a big mistake. Oh my, now I don't, as I said yesterday, I don't go there anymore. It's like, no, nobody expects anybody to be perfect. That's just you, Sheila. That's just you that expects that.
And we're not particularly good at guessing what other people think either, because we always put our spin on it. So it's so accurate most of the time.
Yeah. So for me, that's really helpful to understand that we all live in separate realities. Everybody's creating their own experience. No two people think exactly the same. So actually, you know, I think people, and I think there's also this thing, I think people warm to us if we're more honest about it and stop
absolutely
facade of perfection. And actually, you know, I'm human, I make mistakes. Please forgive me if that was a problem for you. I'll do my best to make it right next time, and I'll pick up where I am and head on with it. You know, there's no perfection it's all perfect and it's not perfect at the same time. So, you know, take from that what you will. But I'm more about coming from as I said earlier on, about space of enjoying and, you know, joy and love, really. It's a really central part for me now that it's the place that we're coming from that's more important than the actual, you know, this is the thing with the 3 principles, isn't it? That we talk about, don't listen to the words. It's not about information. It's not in the words. And that last session that we had with Lily and Thomas, I mean, that was so evident that they were coming from such a beautiful place. They just wanted to really, share what they've been seeing and share a bit about what their story's been and how it does ripple out and affect other people. And it really does. And I know that now in my heart that's the case. And if you I think it's Dr. Bill Pettit that shares that, you know, people don't care what you've got to say until they know that you care. Something like that. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true that when people really feel that you're caring, they'll forgive you for pretty much anything, right?
And that is amazing. I found the same thing to be true. And since you brought up love, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the Viva event, because I love the explanation. You've got dancing, you've got fun, you've got laughter. You think of a training as something that you sit there through and that type of thing. So I'd love to hear about where that idea came from and how did you approach other people and say, I just want to have fun with this and have this be a different experience than what we all expect something like that to be?
Right. Well, there's two of us. There's Sue Pankowicz and myself, the co-founders. I mean, Mark, my ex-partner, was involved a bit the first year, but he's not into organising, so he kind of dropped out a bit. But the original idea, Sue came from a slightly different perspective than me. I had the idea. I think it was going to conferences. Now, I've got nothing against conferences. But I think we were really clear that we wanted to create something that was not a conference. It was going to be, yes, there's going to be teaching, yes, there's going to be training, but we didn't want the conference where you sit all day and listen to speakers. We wanted people to join in, interact, and have some fun. And what we noticed is that we really enjoyed the breaks. You connect with people in the breaks, and then before you know it, they're like hustling you back into the room, and we want more time with people, right? And lunchtime, you're having a really lovely conversation with people, and it's like, oh my goodness, we're supposed to be back we're supposed to be back in the room, so you kind of hurry up and get back in the room. And many people had the same feelings as we had about that. We'd like a bit more space and a bit more time. So we started something in the UK called Space for Connection, and that's where was really Sue's idea. That was between Sue, Katya and I, that started in the UK. So a bit of that filtered into the Viva event. So we didn't call it a conference. It was quite hard to get people to stop saying the Viva conference, but we were really clear, this is not a conference, this is an event. We had other words that we thought we could use. We might have used experience, but we just thought, keep it simple. So Viva, obviously we're in Spain, it's about life. So we wanted people to really understand this is, Sid always said, go out and enjoy your life. You get this, drop all the books, throw the tapes away, live your life, enjoy it. So we really took that on board. And because it's where I live, on the coast, by the beach, and I've heard him say on tapes, I never met him unfortunately, but I've heard him say on the audios, go take a walk along the beachfront. So that seemed like common sense as well to us. So we built in these lovely big breaks. So we just do sort of a morning, then we give everybody the afternoon off so they can go and enjoy life. They can go and live life. They can go by the beach. They can, do whatever they want, and then come back in the evening for an evening session for a couple of hours. People love that format. And so then we say, we're like, so how can we make it different? Let's throw in a bit of entertainment. So the first year we had Viva Surprise on the program. And what I did was, my daughter is a dance teacher, ballet teacher. So we know a lot of people around here that do that sort of thing. So I got a couple, male and female, to come and do some Spanish dancing. So we had that as a surprise. People loved it. And the joy, of course, that sparked everybody wanting to get up on the dance floor. So then the next year, another surprise, we have we did some singing, and people joined in with that. So it's very much about connection. And the testimonials we got at the end, everybody was saying about the feeling, the love. And it was like that. That's why I say the central part of this is people drop into a space really, really quickly at Viva now. This last one that we had was number 3. And it was incredible to us to experience how quickly people just dropped into connection and being one really in the room, and wanting to hang out together, wanting to dance together, wanting to eat together. It's just absolutely beautiful. And we had Elsie Spittle with us for the last one. And she even, when with the dancing and the singing, it was lovely to see her joining in. She said to me, this is what we used to do on Salt Spring. This is how it used to be.
In all these stories, that's what I've heard.
And I was like, I didn't know that. I had no idea. We even put some words up on a board, and she was singing. There was a picture of us holding hands, and we were all singing out loud together. It was just beautiful, And these things, you never know how they're going to turn out, as we've been talking. Sue and I do our best to plan, create something that we hope everybody will enjoy, but it's the people that make it. You can't make that happen. People drop into this beautiful feeling of connection, and it's like, I feel like it's one big party. It's like my favorite event now of the year.
It's funny, the first year of the Academy, when I went in as Michael's assistant, I was blown away, and I'm like, how did you get a group of people that all love each other that don't know each other? Like, they act like they've been with each other forever. You must be a miracle worker. What did you do to prepare all these people and get them all to love each other before they got here? And I really thought it was an anomaly. And the second year we got there, and day one was the same thing. And they were bearing their souls and sharing their, tragedies and things that they might never want anyone else to know about them. They were just willingly sharing. And I thought, there's got to be a technique that created this safe space. And, I got to figure this out, because this is brilliant. And yet, year after year, it happened. And it was just the genuine love between the people that emerges when you don't have all that thinking, that's underneath that all the time. And there's nothing that you're doing, you're just eliminating the things that cause the extra thinking and giving them a safe place to be in that space. And it's astounded me every single training I've ever been to. It still catches me off guard of, wow, that happens fast.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. It really is. And as I say, I don't feel that we have anything to do with it particularly, but behind the scenes, for the top, behind the scenes, we do all the preparation. We create what we think will work. And we've had 3 years now to fall back on, see what works and what doesn't, and voila, magic happens. It's amazing.
And in community work, when I've been reading the different, books by Elsie and Roger and everything, I can't tell you how many times it starts with bringing cookies, or cupcakes. And I'm like, really? That, it can be that simple of just letting people know you care about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it works being in a holiday resort as well, being by the sea, people like getting on a plane. And I know when I worked as a Thomson rep, which is how I ended up in Spain, my dream to travel, I used to love going to the airport and collecting people. And that was, most reps didn't enjoy that bit. They thought it was boring going to the airport and coming back on a bus, bringing people. But I loved it because when they pick people up, they're in holiday mode. They're all happy. Sometimes there are some drunk people, I have to admit, on the dealt with those fine. But everybody, why wouldn't you want to go to the airport and pick up people who've just landed and they're all fired up and ready to enjoy themselves? Isn't that interesting that they kind of leave all that thinking behind, leave that home, and they think it's the holiday that's giving them the feeling. But actually what they're doing is saying, I'm on holiday now, I can leave all that stuff behind and I can just do a week or 2 weeks, I can do whatever, I can be who I want to be. And then they go home and pick it all up again. And then they drab, people literally save in the UK, they literally save all year to go on holiday for 2 weeks to have that freedom. And they think it's coming from the holiday. And then they go, oh, I'm not on holiday anymore. Oh, I've got to pick up all that stuff and get back into it. It's really, as I'm talking, I hadn't really seen that clearly, but I see that really clearly now.
We have a couple questions that have come in. And Anne, the first one is, what were the 3 phrases that were downloaded kind of into you, or is that personal? Are you willing to
no,
share?
It's not. Yeah, it's not personal, and I didn't go into it because and it took me about 2 years to realize that the 3 phrases actually were telling me the 3 principles in a different way. And actually they sound strange to begin with, because they sound a bit counterintuitive, but actually they do make sense. So they are, they were talking about whatever feeling I had at the time, whatever feeling or thought I was having at the time. And so they said, the phrases were, don't let this go, don't let it fade, just trust. Okay, and that sounds a bit strange, but actually when I thought about it later, I mean, at the beginning, I just did it. I didn't think about it, and it worked brilliantly. And it does make sense that it works because it's talking about not trying to get rid of your feelings. Okay, you're not in control of your thoughts and your feelings, so there's no point in trying to get rid of them. But if you say, let them go, that's like doing something. If you say, don't let it go, your mind automatically lets it go anyway. but you're not trying to let it go, right? And you're not trying to change it in any way. You're just trusting in knowing that you are oneness, you are mind, whatever you want to call it. Now, I didn't know that's what it meant when the phrases came to me. But basically, as I say, it took me 2 years before I thought, actually, that was telling me the three principles. So, in a strange way, and I still, and at first, when I first learned the 3 principles, and you don't need techniques, and you shouldn't, and I was like, oh, but that's sort of a technique, but actually, it isn't. It's actually a way of allowing you to do nothing. You know, it's just a reminder to do nothing. So, so I still use it. You know, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I've got things on my mind, I think, I say to myself, okay, so now I'm awake. I've got time to meditate. I've got time to, you know, I don't need to get back to sleep. So I'll just repeat the phrases, and then I'm asleep in no time at all, because I'm not trying to get rid of my thinking. I'm not trying to change how I'm feeling. I'm not trying to change anything. And so I just let go of everything without trying to. And yeah, that's what they are.
It's interesting because when people talk about techniques, there's a lot of, oh, don't do techniques. And yet techniques were originally an insight from somebody about how something worked for them. So if you have a genuine insight that may look like a technique or be called a technique and it works for you, it is a way of your wisdom speaking and sharing of trying something new and thinking differently about something.
Yeah, it's a bit like even the Monjul teachers teach asking questions. You know, you're asking and asking questions. You could say it was a technique, but actually, it's just reminding you that you know, of who really are you and what really are you, and so on. And even Byron Katie's work, which is sort of a technique, is just reminding you to, well, what is that really true? And is that really true? And is that really true? It's yeah, as you say, it's just a reminder of who we really are and what we really are, and what's behind everything. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We had a comment, wow, awesome, thank you, from the person who asks. So that's great.
Thanks.
And then Clesia said, thank you for the tip, Dr. Ann Curtis. I'll look into creating video intros and see what they are about. So Clesia Mendez can reach out to you with your email address.
I know. Yeah, she knows me already.
Great. So maybe she can help with some of those videos as well.
Okay.
And if anyone else has questions, they can certainly post them on the Q&A as we go through. Is there anything specific that I haven't asked you that you'd really like people to know about working behind the scenes? We have a lot of people who come to the center who really would like to work in the community, but don't see themselves as a coach or a speaker or somebody who's in front of the camera, and maybe don't see the importance of the fact that you can be behind the scenes making a large contribution to sharing this work and getting it out there. So do you have anything to share about that?
Well, you go if you want, Anne.
Well, the only thing I was thinking of was just ask, you know, I mean, there are so many people like Pete's done. I know Pete's gone and done tons of stuff now, because he's volunteered for all sorts of things and done lots of stuff behind the scenes, and now is beginning to do stuff himself, you know, to be out front himself. But there's tons of stuff to do behind the scenes. So it's just a matter of asking. Even on the resources page, you could just, on the resources group, you can just put the thing out there and say, okay, who needs some help, or who would like some help behind the scenes somewhere? I think there's lots to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all,
Sheila.
Practical, yeah, that's good practical advice. For me, it feels like if we have an understanding of the principles, then we can't help but have that ripple out into people's lives. So, you know, as a mother, for example, if you have an understanding of the principles, I'm going to go back to love again. The secret to that is loving your children, right? I mean, we all love our children, but if we make that the key or the focal point versus the trying to use different techniques and strategies to get them out of bad behavior or something. I think when we understand that who we are and who they are, they have their own wisdom. I mean, I coach a woman who's here in Spain, Spanish woman, and we've been coaching on and off for quite a few years, and I've watched her daughter, who's now 12, be her teacher. And we talk about that quite a lot now, that you just listen to your daughter, and she's like, now she says to me, she's my biggest teacher. But that's because she's been able to drop all this control, because she has a lot of control. She had a lot of control issues, And she can see how much she's been trying to control the direction that her daughter goes in. You know, that she must go to this school, she must learn this language, she must do this, she must do this. And her daughter has ended up being bullied and not, just really not enjoying her life, because her mother thought she was doing the best she possibly could by paying for education and sending her to this school where she's been bullied. And she had this insight, maybe that's not right. Maybe another school's the right one. So she sent her to an alternative school. She started just a couple of months ago, and she can't believe the change. And then the immediate thing was she was worried because there's no homework. Well, there's no homework coming home. They can't be doing the job right. She's got no curriculum. What's going on? Because this other school was just loading her up with homework, and she had to do that. She's 2 minutes late, she was in trouble. This one, apparently, they can take their dogs in. They have very open, they have to go out and sow seeds and cultivate the land, and really beautiful, really. And her daughter's coming home with a big smile on her face and full of joy, right? And she wasn't like that before. So my point is, we have no idea that we're behind the scenes in some respect for touching people with the understanding. So it doesn't mean we have to go out and share. We don't have to go out and create a meetup or go out and be a coach, or just have a little quiet time and reflect within. Are you actually living the principles? And I always find that an odd term, actually, because we're always living the principles. We can't, but are we consciously aware of the principles? Are we consciously aware of the way that we're living without having to make it a thing? And see is that true or not? And if not, then maybe there's time for a bit of reflection and going within again. And then we are, and we are behind the scenes then, and we are helping people. We're giving them the gift of how we're feeling, if that makes sense. It's like we're spreading the love. We're spreading the love, that's all.
It does, and I love the fact that you brought in the parenting and stuff, because there's so many parenting manuals out there, and to do it this way and to do it this way. And I can remember specifically when my girls were little and they were fighting, it was very important to me. They never hit each other or never fight, because I didn't want a violent household. And I would read all these books on that. And one day they were getting at each other, and I said, all right, I want you to sit on the stairs and touch nose to nose for 5 minutes. And they couldn't do it without laughing hysterically. And all the anger just disappeared. And that didn't come from any book. It came from out of the blue. It was just an insight of, this is silly. They're not really mad at each other. How can I get them back to seeing that the quickest way possible? And they'll still talk about it to this day. And they took a picture at my older daughter's wedding, nose to nose, for me to remind me of it. But just those ideas that come, being open to those ideas, instead of, even in running events, there's a specific way you're supposed to do it or something like that. And being open to the point that maybe that's not necessary, or maybe there's a different way to go about it. It lends to so much more creativity.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Well, this is a really nice space that we're in here, and I hate to take away from it, but it is time to wrap up. So I know that we have some notices, but first I really want to thank you both for taking your time and for sharing your talent and your ability to talk from the heart about what you've seen, because that's what makes this telesummit so powerful. And especially to you, Sheila, for stepping on the other side a little bit and letting me play your role. And I hope I've done it justice. It's much harder than it looks. So what I really want to say is, thank you to everybody, both the listeners and the participants as well, the people who ask questions, the people who talk about this to their friends and share what's been going on. It makes a difference to all of us and makes us feel really good about doing this for everybody.